Tune into Nice Radio every Saturday at 7:30 a.m. for A View from the Outside, hosted by Brereton Horne. A View from the Outside takes a look at key issues affecting St. Vincent and the Grenadines and gives a global perspective on how these issues are viewed. Host Brereton Horne will examine a variety of topics to enlighten, stimulate debate, and explore solutions. Hear the facts, hear the real-life stories, hear A View from the Outside. Join Brereton Horne at 7:30 a.m. every Saturday on Nice Radio for A View from the Outside.
This society needs a spectacle. It might help us to see some evil. This society needs a spectacle.
On A View from the Outside this week being the 9th of November 2019, we look at law, L-A-W, law, with the view being that it is imperative that Vincentians are aware of their rights in law and understand that no one is above the law, irrespective of who he or she is or what he or she does. The second edition of the Black's Law Dictionary defines law as the legal system in a country and the aggregate of legislation, judicial precedents, and accepted legal principles. And the Cambridge Dictionary defines law as a rule usually made by a government that is used to order the way in which society behaves. From those definitions, it is important to note that law is a system of rules which govern everyone in a country in which they apply. Law is the law of the land and is made up of the written constitution, as in the case of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, legislation, which are acts of parliament, judicial precedents, which are laws made by judges in their interpretation of legislation, and other legal rules and principles, example, regulations, which aid in the interpretation of legislation. From the definitions, it is also important to note that law is used to bring order in society. Also of note is that while government or parliament is responsible for making law, those who make the law must also uphold the law. Today's program is triggered by a series of decisions in the United States of America, the USA, and the United Kingdom, the UK, which clearly and firmly show that no one, whether it is the president, the prime minister, or the police, is above the law. And it is those decisions, those examples, which serve to remind us that no one is above the law, also applies in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The decisions outlined below, but not necessarily in chronological order, are: the first of those decisions pertains to the 45th President of the United States of America, Donald J. Trump, who was ordered by the Court of Appeal to hand over 8 years of his tax return to New York prosecutors. For years, the president resisted several requests to hand over his tax returns. However, a single judge ruled that he must hand them over, a decision which he appealed and lost. Prosecutors requested his tax returns because they believed that those tax returns contain, among other things, incriminating evidence in relation to payments alleged to have been made to a porn star, Stormy Daniels, allegedly to buy her silence in the run-up to the 2016 elections in the USA. President Trump vows to appeal to the Supreme Court of the United States of America. However, unless and until such appeal is made, and unless that decision is overruled, the president must hand over his tax returns. Interestingly, one of the arguments used by the president's legal team is that as president, he enjoys total immunity while in office. That argument effectively means that as president in office, he is above the law. Clearly, the law court and the Court of Appeal disagreed and effectively ruled that no one, not even the President of the United States of America, is above the law. The second of those decisions relate to the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Boris Johnson. Again, the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom ruled against him. The Supreme Court ruled that his suspension or prorogation of Parliament was unlawful. That decision of the Supreme Court of the UK has led many, including from his own party, the Conservative Party, to say that the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, lied to the public and effectively lied to the Queen about the reasons for the suspension or prorogation of Parliament. Here, again, the Supreme Court's decision has demonstrated that no one, not even the Prime Minister of the UK, is above the law. The next decision relates to a ruling in the High Court in the UK. The ruling was made against the Metropolitan Police. The High Court ruled that the Metropolitan Police acted unlawfully when they imposed a ban on a group of environmental protesters called Extinction Rebellion from protesting in London. As a result of that High Court ruling, the Metropolitan Police are now likely to face a plethora of claims for compensation for false imprisonment from hundreds of affected protesters. Again, that High Court ruling shows that no one, not even the Metropolitan Police, is above the law. It is those examples and the lessons that they teach, which we, on A View from the Outside, are encouraging Vincentians, each and every one, to be aware of your rights in law and understand that no one in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, or anywhere else for that matter, is above the law, irrespective of who he or she is, or irrespective of what he or she does. The Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines is not above the law. He, like everyone else in the country, must abide by the laws of the country. The government cabinet in St. Vincent and the Grenadines is not above the law. Each and every member of that cabinet, as individuals and as a collective, must abide by the law. The government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines itself is not above the law. They must abide by the law. The Constitution of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the highest law of the land, requires the government to provide accountability to the people of the country. And the government must do so. They are required to do so if you continue to demand that they do it. The government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines is required by the Constitution of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the highest law of the land, to lay before the Parliament of the country audited financial statements approved by the Director of Audit for any and all spending which requires parliamentary approval. In that vein, the government is required to provide such accountability for millions of dollars of Petrocarib money which they obtained from Venezuela. They are also required to provide accountability for the millions of dollars which during the election campaign of 2015, they said they had to spend. They are required to provide such accountability for the hundreds of millions of dollars spent on the construction of the Argyle International Airport, the highest capital project to date in the country. If the government acquires lands from citizens, they are required to do so in accordance with the law, and they ought to pay compensation in accordance with the law. They must not continue to let Marcus de Freitas languish for payment of his multi-million-dollar property, which they acquired over a decade ago, and for which the court ordered that he must be paid, yet they refuse to pay him. They must fully compensate all the landowners whose lands they acquired at Argyle to construct the airport there. If they intend to acquire people's lands, they must do so in accordance with the law. They must not concoct or fabricate statutory rules and orders, which they are alleged to have done in the case of Bigger Biggs, when they shut down his multi-million-dollar business at Rabacar, and as a consequence, made scores of employees unemployed. Government officials and employees, including consul generals and deputy consul generals and other staff in missions overseas, are not above the law. They must uphold the law. And if they don't uphold the law, they ought to be punished by the law. The police of St. Vincent and the Grenadines are not above the law. They must function within the parameters of the law. And they have a responsibility to investigate reports of all crimes, irrespective of who the crime is reported against. They have an obligation to uphold the law. They must not operate wantonly or indiscriminately. They have an obligation to uphold the law. They must not recklessly assault and arrest protesters, like they did in the case of protesters on the front line, including Lizard King and many others, including Dougie de Freitas. They must uphold the law. The thief, whether a common thief or one who steals thousands of dollars from the government or any other establishment, is not above the law. Those who steal the produce and livestock of farmers are not above the law. The burglar, the person who robs, are not above the law. Those who kill or seriously injure others are not above the law. Those who commit and perpetuate domestic violence are not above the law. Those who rape are not above the law. The message, therefore, is that no one is above the law. And so, we, on A View from the Outside, urge all Vincentians to become involved in the affairs of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and to ensure that the Prime Minister, the government, the police, and any other entity or individual in the country uphold the law. Ensure that everyone abides by the law. Ensure that the organs of the state function fully and separately so that the law is upheld. Do not shirk your responsibility. You must remember at all times that no one is above the law. Not you, not the Prime Minister, not the government, not the police. No one is above the law. And so, as you set out to ensure that the law is upheld by all, consider the words of former Governor of California, Antonio Ramon Villaraigosa. He said, and I quote, "Let me be clear, no one is above the law. Not a politician, not a priest, not a criminal, not a police officer. We are all accountable for our actions, unquote. Until next week, Justin and all of the listeners, this is Brereton Horne with a view from the outside, with a reminder to send feedback, as usual, to aviewfromtheoutside@hotmail.com. You can also get us on Facebook at A View from the Outside and on YouTube at JMB Horne. Justin, you and all of the listeners have a pleasant Saturday, a wonderful Sunday, and a productive week ahead, with everyone remembering that no one in St. Vincent and the Grenadines is above the law.